Welcome to The Future of What? I'm your host, Portia Sabin, president of the independent record label Kill Rock Stars. Today, we're revisiting some of the interviews from the past year and a half with artists talking about the business issues that affect them. It's all coming up on The Future of What?
Can I have a taste of your ice cream? Can I lick the crumbs from your table? Can I interfere in your crisis? No, mind your own business. No, mind your own.
This is CD Baby artist and lawyer Christiane Kinney talking about the recent Spotify lawsuits. Christiane, welcome to The Future of What?
Thank you. Thanks for having me again.
This is your second time. I love it. We're gonna start a club for people who've been on the show more than twice. You get to
Nice.
You get a free T-shirt
Woohoo.
and a pizza.
Ooh, now we're talking.
So today I wanted to talk to you because of your exciting dual role as both a lawyer and a musician about these two lawsuits that are being brought against Spotify,
Right.
these two class action lawsuits. We have spoken to a couple other lawyers, and we've also spoken to Melissa Farrick, who is the plaintiff, the lead plaintiff in one of the cases. So I think we are pretty clear for the audience on what the cases are about. But I'm interested in your perspective on these cases. Like, as a musician, how do you feel about these cases? And, where do you think this is going to end up?
Well, it's really an interesting thing. I do have the dual role as an attorney and a musician, and I tend, when I look at a lawsuit, and especially a class action like this, I tend to look at it with my lawyer hat on. This was kind of an inevitability because they were very honest and upfront about their business plan. And, I love to tell people, look, when you're creating something like a Spotify, when we're at these music tech companies, I'm like, look, there is this business model that is build something cool and work it out on the back end. And that type of business model has become more and more popular because the licensing structures are so difficult for people to grasp and understand. But there's a real danger in that. And the dangers are that you're going to have these types of lawsuits coming up and going after you. As far as what it means to me as a musician, I struggle the same as a lot of artists do with the amount of money that you're getting per stream. But the reality is this is a streaming world. It's something that the consumers like and obviously love. How many active users does Spotify have now? I think it's like 50 million or more, and they were working their way up quickly. So, it's not going away, but this is a real risk to them. This is something they have to take obviously really seriously because you obviously have the 200 million and the 150 million in damages that they're going after. But beyond that, this is a class action. So the attorney's fees are going to be enormous. And that's an upfront cost to the attorneys. But what the musicians get on the back end, Melissa will get something, David will get something. Most musicians aren't really going to get a huge benefit from this, except that it provides a mechanism for the conversation to move forward. Obviously Spotify was already, I'm talking too much, but Spotify was already talking in December about, building this publishing admin kind of system and database so that we could handle all of this. That's going to take years. So these are mechanisms to try and figure out a workability around the mechanicals for these interactive streaming services.
So you say you think most artists are not going to receive much, if anything, from this this lawsuit.
The attorneys are going to receive a lot. And honestly, it's somewhat fair because they're fronting the costs for this, and class actions are very expensive. The attorneys will receive something. The core plaintiffs will receive something. Some musicians will receive something. But I think to get a class certified, we're probably going to get letters in the mail in 3 to 5 years, giving us notice as a class member, allowing us to opt in. We'll probably get to select a $5 one-time payment or maybe a 1-month premium Spotify service. That's the type of things you get in these class notices. So for the mass of us, I think the more interesting thing with these cases is what's going to come of it. These are, like I said, they enable the conversation to expand beyond, fitting a circle into a square hole right now, which is kind of how we work around these streaming issues with the copyright laws being what they are. So something's going to happen from it. Whether or not we're going to get our global database of all publishers ever, it's been tried so many times. So I doubt that, it's a pie in the sky of that, but, maybe.
Do you think it'll change practices at Spotify, though? Do you think Spotify, starting now, will actually start trying to get mechanical licenses or at least sending ROIs to musicians before they put their stuff up on the service?
It's a difficult thing because they already chose their business plan, their model for this in the States in whenever they started, 2011, I think they came here. And they had a choice at that time that they could have launched with a smaller library of songs, and they could have just gone with the songs that were licensed. But they didn't. And so they chose a model that had a risk involved to it. The risk now, if you pull, some people say, well, they just need to provide the list of all of the songs that they don't have mechanicals for. And now that they've been sued, they're basically just, they're not going to gift somebody a list of all the class members. But I do like the idea of that. It can be like Sound Exchange. I've seen friends on Sound Exchange whose names, come in alphabetical order with mine. And I'm like, oh, hey, you're owed money for, and it's a different hybrid, but that works. If you're looking for people, really honestly looking for people, I don't think it's pragmatic at all to serve, the special notices on the Copyright Office, because that was really created for a system where you have a label that maybe has an artist doing some cover songs and they have to clear one or two songs, or even if it's a full album of 10 or 12 songs that you have to clear these for and don't know somebody. As an attorney, I make calls a lot, and it's pretty easy to find rights holders. I looked up David, I looked up Melissa, pulled up BMI.com, found them right away in the repertoire search database, found Melissa also on the ASCAP database, because sometimes people switch. It could be another person with her exact name. Found both of them in HFA. And actually, it's interesting. I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard that Spotify had outsourced this initially when they launched here to Harry Fox Agency to deal with the mechanicals, because they knew it was an issue. But it's such a grand scale. So it's not like you can have an attorney clearing every song. I think they have 20 million songs or more, and there's 20,000 being added daily. So when you get on that level, that's why I think this is a conversation starter, honestly, of how do we deal with this. I do think that, I didn't answer your question, but I do think Spotify will change their practices. And they already, I think before the lawsuit, had announced that they were going to start working on this global type of publishing admin system, this database. But again, that's going to take years. But, rather than outsourcing it, I think they do have to take that on themselves and spend a substantial amount of time and energy making that work.
So one of the other lawyers we spoke to said that he was speaking about David Lowery's suit in particular. And he said if David had brought this as an individual, this would have been a slam dunk, open and shut case.
Mm-hmm.
But because he chose to go with it as a class action, it's going to really take a really long time. And there are these hoops now that have to be jumped through for musicians to prove that they're part of the class. Like you have to actually, you have to have your copyrights registered with the Library of Congress. You have to have, X, Y, and Z to prove that you're actually a member of the class.
Right.
Why do you suppose they actually decided to go with a class action rather than an individual suit?
Because there are mass violations happening here and the attorneys can make more money. And ultimately, let's just be on the side of the attorney for a moment and assume that their intentions are valid. They can protect the little guy. Not everybody has the ability to bring an individual lawsuit like this. Not everyone's going to have the resources. Not everyone's going to have the access to attorneys. So if the goal is to protect the musician, it's very smart to bring a class action, this type of case, because there is a good possibility that they can certify a class here. The damages are somewhat easy to establish. With interactive streaming, there's a formula involved. So it becomes a little more complicated, and maybe they can argue on the other side, okay, well, this person's getting 1 million streams, but this person's getting fewer, two streams.
Right.
They're not very good.
Right.
So there are complexities. Doesn't make David's lawsuit any less valid. It just means that ultimately a class might not get certified. And that, the class action work that I've done in the past, usually on the defense side of things, we have gotten classes decertified because there's a lot of hoops to jump through. But I think in the end, the reason for it is really to protect artists that couldn't bring an individual lawsuit or that wouldn't, and to make this more of a global conversation for artists.
Well, Christiane Kinney is a lawyer and a musician, and she's joined us today from her home, and we really appreciate that because I love the fact that you can bring us both perspectives. So, Christiane, thanks so much for being on The Future of What.
Thank you, guys.
That was Hetty's Head by Kleenex Lilliput. If you're enjoying this program, please subscribe to our show on iTunes. To find out what's coming up next, follow us on Twitter at KRSFOW. This is David Lowery of Cracker, Camper Van Beethoven, and the Tricordist blog discussing transparency in royalty reporting. So, you've written several posts about this Berkeley Rethink Music study. Can you tell us who funded the study and why that's important?
It appears from the statements on the report that it's funded by Cobalt Music, which is a music publishing administration sort of company. But what's interesting about Cobalt is at least somewhat funded, certainly has a fairly large investment from Google through their Google Ventures. So when we see that begins to make us somewhat suspicious because, Google owns YouTube. And if there's any place where we're lacking transparency in the music business is what the heck goes on with YouTube?
Exactly.
What are we being paid for? How are we being paid? How is that calculated, et cetera, et cetera?
So this study focuses on the money that's being paid out to artists by labels and publishers, but not really on where that money is coming from, as you said. And in my
Right.
opinion, transparency should begin there.
Yes, absolutely. That's basically what we're getting at, is that we realize there is always going to be some sort of black box money at the PROs, BMI and ASCAP, at the labels and distributors and such, because with the number of songs out there's always going to be some money that doesn't get assigned somewhere. But if you look at the grand scheme of things, that is a smaller black box than what we see at the digital distributors. What I'm concerned about is that there's actually more of an issue with transparency on digital services side, like how are they generating revenue? How much are their expenses in generating this revenue? Which ads, for instance, on the ad-supported side of things in Spotify and YouTube, which ads get assigned to the artist revenue streams and which ones don't? Because this isn't totally clear and there's no real information on this.
Right. And my favorite part about what you said in one of your posts had to do with, the difference between a black box, let's say, that Sound Exchange would have had, and we're about to talk to Mike Huppy, the president of Sound Exchange, and the black box that Sound Exchange was dealing with was money that came in and that they were unable to find the proper place for. But they have no incentive. They have no stake in holding on to that money. They would like to pay it out to artists and labels. But with something like Spotify, let's just take Spotify as an example, with a streaming service, as you point out, they shouldn't even have this problem if they were doing their licensing properly in the first place.
Right. One of the problems with why there's a black box at the streaming services is that they sort of, at least in my case, it looks like they just put my entire song catalog up there without really checking to see if they had licenses for everything. Like some things they had licenses for because some of my music is published by a major label and just or administered by a major label, but some of it isn't. And so in my case, it looks like they just put it out there without obtaining the licenses first. So that makes it very difficult for them to pay, right? Now, they appear to be retroactively going back and trying to find some of these or to obtain some of these licenses. But I know that there's a good 50 or 60 of my songs out there that they're using without a proper license. So that would make it very difficult for them to pay me. There's another issue in there, though, also as well. See, when we're told that, for instance, like 50% of the revenue or 70% of the revenue or 60% of the revenue, depending on the service, is being paid out to rights holders, there's also usually a caveat in there that it's minus the fees that are associated with the fees associated with obtaining this advertising, right? There's probably fees paid out to brokers who, sort of essentially collect advertisers who want to advertise on these services. And there is zero transparency there. We don't know who those brokers are, what these expenses are that are charged back against the advertising revenue. And sometimes, at least I suspect in the case of YouTube, it's essentially Google's advertising wing paying itself and deducting expenses before the revenue is sort of put into the pie to be divided up between rights holders and YouTube. So you see what I'm saying? Like there's also this sort of non-transparency in what those expenses are to obtain the advertising that seem to be fairly significant.
Absolutely. As you say in one of your posts, you say 70% of X. Well, that doesn't help us because we don't actually know what that X is. I mean, that's an important part. And that's something that, that's why people have record deals. I mean, I think it's an interesting report. I don't want to be 100% negative to it because one of the things we just spoke to Panos Panay, who works for Berkeley ICE, and he was saying that one of the reasons they published this report was to bring issues that are important for musicians to know about into the open. And listen, you can't fault that. I think transparency is an important issue. I think that more musicians need to understand the business side, et cetera. But there are some very problematic parts of this report, one of which is that right now we've got a situation where people don't have access to information about how much money services like YouTube are making in advertising revenue.
Right. Even Wall Street has complained about this.
Right, which
when
seems
Wall
impossible.
Street is saying that YouTube and Spotify and all these services are completely non-transparent, you can't get a blacker pot calling a kettle black.
Right.
You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. It's like the ultimate.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So this call for transparency, I think, is wonderful. I think there's some good things in the report, but I just don't understand how you can do that without also trying to, shed light onto the digital services. And is this because essentially they're funded in some way through YouTube, Google, or that at least there's some sort of financial connection there? Is that why that was omitted? Was it uncomfortable for the authors to do that? Was it just an oversight? But, it's something that's worth questioning.
Well, my main interest in discussing this study on this show is that I believe we have a serious PR problem in the music industry, and we have for years. And that is just, that this study went for the low-hanging fruit, which is, labels take artists' money. Well,
right. Which
tell us
we do.
Something we don't know.
I have a label too. I'm an artist and I also have a label. We do take artists' money, but it's usually because we've spent money like promoting that album or marketing, or hiring a publicist or tour support and things like that, right?
Right.
We do take, speaking as a label owner, we do take artists' money, but
Right. But there's a difference between recouping your expenses and taking your agreed upon portion, which you have a contract with the artist for, which is 50% or 60% or whatever you
right,
have agreed to, and stealing money, taking money
right,
away that should be rightfully for the artist.
right,
And I think that, the problem I have with this report is that's how it was publicized was, 20 to 50% of money does not make it to artists. And that's just
right.
completely misleading and unfair.
Well, first of all, that quote is based on anonymous sources without actually any data to back it up. I don't doubt that 10% doesn't make it to artists. I mean, it's a messy business.
Right.
There's a lot of rights holders out there and stuff like that. But at the same time, if it was really 50%, you're talking billions of dollars in fraud. I'm not sure you have kind of an Enron style fraud going on here, and nobody's calling their lawyers or their accountants or even, the attorney generals and stuff like that. So again, I'm also suspect of that 20 to 50% figure. It seems high to me, and it's not really supported with anything. So I don't know. It's not supported with any data. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's just attributed to anonymous sources, which is
Yes.
always suspect.
It is. It is. It's very, and the whole report has sort of a problem of authorship as well, where it's like, where are the authors? There are no names on this report, which
Right.
is odd.
What did your last guest, did he shed any light on who authored the report? Because it's not clear from the report itself who authored it. And
Nope, he
uh,
didn't, although he was quite supportive of the report and he certainly was taking ownership of it. He wasn't taking authorship, but yeah.
right.
So the one last thing I wanted to ask you about quickly is that early in the report, the authors, whoever they are, quote someone as saying, streaming services have no incentive to invest in transparent reporting and accounting systems, which are expensive. And I just thought, what an interesting, like, no incentives?
Well, they have a fiduciary responsibility to pay those whose music they're using. I think that's a crazy pants statement right there. Because I mean, say I'm a songwriter, right? I didn't ask Spotify to get into the business. Oh, okay, we'll distribute your songs. Oh God, now we have to figure out how to account for these songwriters.
They begged us and begged us, please, please stream
They
our music.
begged us to get into this business. I mean, we
Right.
didn't beg them to get into this business.
Right.
And are you telling me that, wait a minute, are you telling me that the computer technology industry can't solve this problem?
Right. If they can't.
And they want artists to solve it? I mean, come on,
Right.
we can't even keep the van clean.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so that's a little crazy there too. It's like they have no, well, I think they do have an incentive in just that they're in the business and they need to account for this stuff. But that does illustrate the attitude. I mean, it's sort of like what I've shown with my catalog is that there are a lot of songs they're using, and somebody hasn't done the licensing properly, and they could have got a compulsory license using the federal statutes anyway. But that hasn't even been done, which makes me want to turn around and, the first place I'm going to look if there's a problem with transparency is at the digital services, which clearly haven't obtained all the proper licenses for my catalog.
Well, right, exactly. And the fact that we can't have a conversation about how much a stream is worth because that stream value changes depending on, the territory and the time of day. And I don't know whether it's ad supported. I mean, there's so many
Mhm.
ifs that we can't even really tell you what the value of a stream is.
Right. So we don't even know if it's a good deal for us or not. From
Right.
an individual artist's viewpoint, it's really difficult to figure out if the streaming services are a good value for us or not. Right? Because we can't even tell what we're being paid. Right?
Correct.
For a while there, here's another interesting thing too. For a while there, some of the labels that I've talked to I'm not sure how they were licensing, if they were licensing directly with Spotify, if they were going through distributors or what, but they could see the difference between the paid streams and the free ad-supported streams and see the difference. And then other labels are not able to do that, and they just have it all lumped together, right?
Right.
So there's a very basic bit of transparency that we could use right there, which is like, can we see the difference between how much I'm getting paid per spin on the paid service versus the ad-supported service?
Right.
But because, for instance, in the case of Spotify, it's an IPO-driven company. It's going to want to have as many users as possible, and they do not have an incentive to split between, the free and the paid tier.
Right.
Right?
Absolutely. David Lowery is a musician and blogger. You can find his writing at thetricordist.com. David, thanks so much for being on our show.
Thanks for doing the show.
This is the story of your red right ankle and how it came to meet your leg, and how the muscle, bone, and sinews tangled, and how the skin was softly shed, and how it whispered, "Oh, adhere to me, for we are bound by symmetry. Whatever differences our lives have been, we together make a limb. This is the story of your red right ankle." This is the story of your gypsy uncle. You never knew 'cause he was dead, and how his face was carved and ripped with wrinkles in the picture in your head. And remember how you found the key to his hideout in the Pyrenees, but you wanted to keep his secret safe, so you threw the key away. This is the story of your gypsy uncle.
That was Red Right Ankle by the Decemberists. You're listening to The Future of What? If you're enjoying this program, like us on Facebook and become a subscriber on iTunes. This is singer-songwriter Laura Viers. So today on The Future of What, we are lucky enough to have in studio with us the wonderful singer-songwriter Laura Viers. Laura, welcome.
Hi, Portia.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm great. I'm so glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
So today we are talking to people about how they got into music in the first place, which sometimes is hard to get all the way back there to like really remember how it all started. But that's what I'd like you to do is tell us from the very beginning, your earliest memories of how you got into music.
Well, I was trained as a concert pianist and toured Europe as a 3-year-old.
Wow. I knew you'd have great stories.
It's a total lie. I didn't get into music till I was in college. I had family members that were playing around the house for fun, guitar and piano, and I took a few lessons here and there. And my brother was in a band, and I thought that looked cool, but I didn't see any girls in bands, and it just didn't seem like something girls were doing. So I didn't really explore it until I saw there were women doing music in college. And the Riot Girl movement really inspired me a lot to start my own songwriting and my own guitar playing. And as soon as I started playing guitar, I started writing songs. And that's really how I see myself in the world, as a songwriter first, a singer second, and a guitar player third, maybe, if I had to do that.
I saw a photo of you from college where you had a shaved head, you were naked, you had hairy legs, and you had a guitar.
Yes, and the guitar was covering up the important parts.
Exactly.
Yes, there is. That's my husband and I did a TED Talk, and I showed that picture, and my mom was not pleased about that. Of course, I have to let her down sometime, right? But yeah, I didn't really get into it till my early 20s, and then I was very serious. My grades dropped, and I was formerly a straight A student and really into. I did graduate with honors from my school, but I quickly learned that, I didn't want to be a geologist, which was the degree that I had. And I didn't really know what else to do. I mean, I just wanted to do music, but it's so hard. It's so hard to figure it out when you're a young person and you're like, well, wait, how do I connect all these dots and actually make an income? And I mean, my whole TED Talk was about that. And my husband, too, he's Tucker Martinez, his name, and he's a producer. And we've made tons of records together and been in the business for 20 years each. And we both really wandered around a lot with our paths, not really making sense at all for many years until slowly they did. And now we're artists and we see ourselves as that for our life. And I mean, who knows how long it'll be a thing that we make money at, but so far so good, and we can keep doing it.
So going back to your college experience, was it the playing of the guitar and writing songs that captured you, or was it the community? Did you find a community at college?
It was both. For sure. I mean, there was certainly something that happened when I first started writing songs that felt deep. Like, wow, this is a whole world. This is not intellectual, really. It could be if you went into like music theory and everything, but I didn't really go that route. It was more, I could just sense there was a depth there, a mystery, and almost this infinite path, which I still see it as. It's like you're never done learning music. So I felt something click in me for sure. Like, this is awesome. I want to do this. And I'm going to do this over and over and over until I can be good at it. And it was a harsh toke for sure when I started playing out because I had terrible stage fright and I couldn't play at all. I couldn't play what I was trying to say in my songs. I was too nervous to execute the guitar parts, and my voice was shaky and weird and sounded really bad. But God bless the souls who watched me in those early days, because I did that over and over and over. Open mics, and then little college coffee shop shows, and then tiny little tours up and down the West Coast with 3 people in the audience. And then, over and over and over, I started learning how to perform. But no one really teaches you that. It's kind of like just school of hard knocks. And some people are really natural performers. I would say I'm not one of those. I would say I'm more of a natural songwriter. But even now, the performance, like certain times it feels so effortless and fluid, but other times it feels like a real struggle.
So you kept at it because of the songwriting portion?
Yeah, I felt like, well, this is so fun for me. This is so cool. And I love this. I felt compelled to share it. And initially that was as a solo person, but then I learned about the Riot Girl movement and started an all-girl punk band. And that was great because I could have my buddies up there with me and I could be the background person, the guitar player and the songwriter and like the backup singer. And then I had my friend Deva, who was a superstar natural performer who was super tall and redhead, kind of like you. She had short hair at the time and really just outgoing and crazy and in-your-face punk rocker. So I could kind of be the back behind-the-scenes guitar player, and I loved that role. And that was really instrumental in helping me get over some of my fears.
Absolutely.
And just having fun with it. And then I wrote a letter to Bikini Kill, and they wrote back. Toby Vale wrote back to me in 1995, probably.
Wow.
And because I asked her, this was before I started the band, I was like, I really want to start a band. How do I do it? And she wrote back, which was so awesome. I was in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota and got this letter from her. And she was like, just play with as many people as you can and have fun and you can do it. And, I didn't know any of those people. I just knew about I would see bands come through Minneapolis. Like this band, the Saltines, was a like all-girl punk band that we would go see.
Uh-huh.
But I'd never seen Bikini Kill. But we had their records and we would play them super loud in our dorm room and jump around on the bed. And so it was really, really important to get that letter.
Yeah.
And move forward. And then also I did see Slater-Kinney in the like mid-90s in Olympia, which was super amazing. And there were a few, like Ani DeFranco was also a big part of my inspiration because I was like, well, she's doing it. She can sell her music from the back of her car and go on tour at age 19 and have a shaved head and people come to her shows. So why can't I do this? Like it was a really good thing to be able to see that.
Yeah. So now I'm interested, you had that experience of having a punk band and having a charismatic front person and you got to be comfortably just the guitar player and songwriter. What made you decide to take the next step and be out there by yourself?
The lead singer wanted to quit. So we graduated and I was like, let's move to Seattle and keep the band going. And the other ladies were like, no. Well, the other 2 would have done it, but then the lead singer was out She just didn't feel it in her bones, even though she was a total natural.
Mm-hmm.
She just didn't feel it. She
Some
didn't have
people
the,
don't.
She didn't have the fire like that deep, you
Yep.
know? So I was like, well, I guess I just have to do that. I gotta just like muster it up and do it myself because I love writing songs.
So it was just out of necessity.
Yeah, because she was done, and I did make some more bands in Seattle. I played in a funk band. I learned how to improvise, but I realized, holding a band together is tough, and I didn't make the connections that I made in college again with women in particular to make another all-girl punk band. So I just struck out on my own and realized, well, I also got interested in country blues guitar, which is really great if you're a solo performer because the guitar does so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot happening with the bass notes. There's a counterpoint melody happening with the fingers, and then your voice can do a third thing. So it's almost like 3 instruments happening just with a
Wow.
guitar and a voice.
Uh-huh.
So I was like, well, I can do a lot with a guitar and a voice, and that was how I structured my first album. And I really got deep into country blues music and inspired by a lot of the old, like Elizabeth Cotton and Mans Lipscomb and Mississippi John Hurt and all those people who were amazing musicians that could do so much with just a voice and a guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how I started my early records.
Now, I have to ask you this because I am a drummer, as you know.
Yes.
But I tried to play guitar for about 12 seconds, and it was so hard that I just quit. And
Yeah.
I'm so impressed when I meet somebody who stuck with it. So how long did you play? I mean, did you pick up the guitar and instantly start playing with your punk band, sort of in the beginning when you barely knew how to play, or what?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I had the basic chords, but bar chords were a struggle. To get my hands strong enough to play like a solid F was a long time of practicing. But I was one of those nerds that just wanted to play all the time, and get really pretty accomplished. Although I was I probably sounded pretty bad in the beginning. I know I did, but I would worry more about my voice in the beginning. The guitar never felt like that big of a struggle.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
The
So you're
voice
probably
was
a
the
natural.
problem.
Yeah.
The guitar has always felt natural to me. It's never felt
wow.
like, I mean, like I said, the bar chords was hard to get my hands strong enough to do that. But the rest of it, I mean, don't get me wrong, country blues guitar is really hard to play, and I would spend hours just slowly working through almost like in a scientific way to learn this music. And then slowly it would start to come and flow, and then it was no problem anymore. But to learn something new that's difficult, it took me a lot of practice.
Wow. But you felt like your voice was the thing that actually needed the work.
Yeah, and I did take some voice lessons, which helped. But I think voice for me is all about confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, most of art is, but the singing particularly, it will reveal your fears quickly under the microscope of the microphone.
Did you feel like you had to experiment with different ways of singing in order to find the place where you were comfortable?
I think, yeah. I mean, I did the yelling thing.
Uh-huh.
I did softer stuff. I did a drawl. I mean, I kind of copied Gillian Welch for a while.
Awesome.
Just tried out different things until I feel like for many people, and this was true in my case, it just takes a bunch of years of doing different kinds of art to find your own voice. And by that, I mean my own songwriting voice and my own singing voice.
Right.
And I guess I'm still finding both of those things, but I do feel more settled in them and I enjoy them more.
Well, and it's just funny. It's always interesting to talk to an artist to see about their perspective, because from my perspective as a listener, I've always thought you had a very distinctive, very strong voice. So when I listen to a piece of music, the first thing I think is, oh, that's a Laura Veirs song because of your voice.
Because of my singing voice or
Because
my
of your
songwriting
singing
voice?
voice.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to know because to me, it's just my boring old voice. But I can see that because I hear that in other artists.
Yeah.
Like they have a distinctive sound to their voice.
Right. Which is, and it's just funny, because some people would say, oh, well, it's my guitar. That's the thing that you're going to know me for.
Right.
But that's fascinating.
Yeah.
So you got yourself going with your voice. You had the guitar, and then you started playing tons of open mics. And at what point would you say you were sort of ready for the next step? Like, where did you take it from there?
I applied to Bumbershoot, which is the festival in Seattle, with a little 4-track cassette demo, and I got in.
Wow.
I was super surprised. They called me and they said, we'd like to offer you a fee of $50. And I said, do I have to pay you $50? And she said, no, we'll pay you. I was like, okay, that sounds awesome. I'll be there.
I'm a professional.
So I was like 10 times what I'd ever made,
Mm-hmm.
So I realized like, hey, I should make a CD because that's like 4 months away. I'd like to
Wow.
have something to sell. And so I met this man on Orcas Island. I was living on San Juan at the time, who had a studio, and he was willing to record me for free. And we spent 3 hours in there. So I made a record in 3 hours, and it's really embarrassing, and I would never sell it now. But I did print it up. I printed up 1,000 copies, and my friend hand silk screened the covers. And they were just little jackets, little folded things. And I sold them, and I called the bumper sheet people. I was like, how many CDs should I bring to the show? Because I think I'm going to sell a lot. I think I should bring like 250. And they said, people at your stage usually sell 5 to 10 CDs. But I did bring, my stack and sold like 5 to 10. But I still had my remaining 995. Yeah. And so I took those out on my little tours up and down the West Coast. And then a couple years passed and I made another record. But that one turned out great. And that one largely turned out great because Tucker made it in his studio. And it was the first one of 10 that we've made together.
Wow.
And I love that record. It's very sparse. I had kind of done enough songwriting to find a little bit of my own songwriting voice. And I was 25 at the time and maybe 26. And I'm honestly, sometimes when my kids like that record, and sometimes when I hear it, I feel envious of it, of my younger self.
Just the simplicity of it.
Yeah, and just the simplicity of the artistry.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like nothing to lose and never done it really, and so fresh.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of feeling that you have when you're 25.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to get when you're 41, So
Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Totally. So you made that record, and did that come out on a label, or did you release that yourself?
Released it myself and was trying to find some help, but KEXP helped me get some listeners for that. But it didn't really come out on a label till later. And then I made another one with Tucker, and that one was, luckily Tucker had a connection to Simon Raymond in London with Bella Union, and he put it out. And then that gave me a platform for the next one, which really took off in England, called Carbon Glacier, and that was 2004. And then that got the attention of the States, and Nonesuch put that out, which was a huge boost for me.
Yeah.
And although I kept thinking things were going to go faster than they were, because it came out on Nonesuch, and then I got a booking agent. They set up a tour. I had done this successful tour in England and France, came back to the States to start hitting the road in the States, and no one was coming to the shows.
Ugh.
It was just like 3 people at that show in Dallas, 3 people in New Orleans, 4 people, and you're driving 8 hours a day and then doing like your whole setup with the band, and everybody's demoralized. But I mean, the next time we did this tour in the States, there was like 25 people, and the next time there might have been like 100. So it did happen, but it took years, bit by bit. But I do appreciate that Nonesuch picked it up, because I was struggling over here. I was getting some foothold in Europe, like some artists do, and not at all in the States. And so they gave me a boost.
How is it for you in Europe now?
It's about the same. It's about evened out.
Oh,
so
cool.
like I can still go over there and like fill 300 to 500 capacity rooms on a CD release or album release tour, or in London, maybe 800 people. But, that's sustainable, but not really if you bring a band. So sometimes I'll just go over there solo and just make a little money, come back. Or if I make an album, I'll go tour with the album over there and lose some money, but it gives the album a boost, and I'll go back solo and just kind of continue over and over. And I'm at this point in my career where I have a sustainable audience so far. I mean, they might drop off, but they haven't yet. And it doesn't seem to be particularly growing, but it allows me to continue to make my art and continue to run my own label, because I was dropped by Nonesuch, which was a huge letdown at the time. But then Chad Crouch, who runs Hush Records, put his name in the hat to run my label, because I was thinking, well, maybe I should just really put my own efforts out there on my own. Maybe that's the smartest thing. And it ended up being great for my next record, which was July Flame. And so, these things seem like a huge letdown at the time, but then they are often an opportunity to start something else that may be even better. And so I feel grateful that I don't know, I just feel grateful for all of the twists and turns that have happened.
And what's nice is that now you're what we would call a career musician, which is you can make a living from your art. You can maximize your profits from selling CDs and stuff because you run your own label.
Yeah.
And you can go on tour when you need to and want to.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's an enviable position to be in, actually.
It is. And I sometimes feel like something bad's going to happen or something because like things are going great.
Don't say that, Laura.
Yeah.
Knock the side of the studio.
Knock on wood. I mean, I just, I do feel so grateful and lucky, and like my life has, like I've got almost everything I've ever wanted. And so it's kind of an amazing place to feel that I'm in.
That's wonderful.
But one thing I do feel always is that I'm never done with music.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never satisfied. I've written that song, and then the next one comes like, well, but you didn't quite. Yes, that's awesome. You got that one. But then what's next? And like that feeling never seems to leave me, which I'm grateful for. Because if it left, then I'd be like, well, I guess I'm just going to be a woman of leisure now and just lie around drinking lemonade.
Yeah. So what do? You have a super busy life. You have a husband, a house, 2 children, a busy life. How do you find that time to songwrite, to write
I
songs?
have to set it aside, and I've always done that, been very diligent and very protective of the time. So 4 hours tends to be enough. Although now that I have 2 kids, 6 hours is good because I can have 2 hours to do some like shopping or cleaning or,
I hear you.
shuffling around the millions of things that need to get shuffled.
Laundry.
Yes. And then 4 hours to do my work, which inevitably ends up being like an hour of songwriting, which actually is all I need. But I need the other 3 hours to be like poking around the internet or like getting my idea from that book or just sitting there staring off into space or whatever.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. So what is next for you? Do you have another album in the works?
I do. Yeah. I'm going to be working with these 2 other women on an album in November. It's Katie Lang and Nico Case. We've been writing the songs together, and we're going to make a trio record in November with Tucker.
Oh my God. I want to pre-order it now. Can I pre-order it now?
We don't have a label yet, but yeah.
That sounds amazing. You don't have a label yet?
Well, they're working on it.
Oh, they're working on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
The managers.
All right. Well, that sounds absolutely fabulous.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's going to be neat. It's been fun to collaborate in a songwriting way with them because I've never really done much co-writing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a whole nother way of approaching music and songwriting. And it's been fun. Like I said, at this stage in my career, I've been doing this fairly alone. I've had Tucker as a collaborator, as the producer and the maker of the records, and my bandmates. But mostly I've been on my own in a room just writing these songs. And so to have others there chiming in and bringing in ideas and lyrics, it's been really fun.
Laura Veers is a singer-songwriter. She lives here in Portland. Laura, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Portia.
That was Panda, Panda, Panda by Deerhoof. If you're enjoying this program, please subscribe to our show on iTunes. To find out what's coming up next, follow us on Twitter at KRSFOW. This is Valerie Day of the band New Shoes discussing the Fair Play, Fair Pay Act. Valerie, welcome to the future of what?
Thanks, Portia. It's great to be here.
So tell us, as someone with a top 5 hit song and a gold record, how much money do you see in performance royalties for terrestrial radio play of those songs?
Nothing.
Yeah. Oh.
Zilch.
Zilch.
Nada.
Nothing.
0.
Okay. So that's what we're here to talk about today. So the good news is that your husband, John Smith, wrote these songs. So
Yes.
you have always gotten money from the songwriting royalties.
Right. It's kind of like he's Dolly Parton and I'm Whitney Houston. Like that's the example that people use sometimes when you're talking about, like, how does publishing work? Well, Whitney Houston sang that famous song from The Bodyguard, but Dolly Parton wrote it.
Right.
So when it gets played on the radio, who makes the money?
Dolly.
Yes. And Whitney and Dolly aren't married as far as I know, actually.
Yes.
And so anyway, yeah, I've been very fortunate that John wrote that music,
Absolutely.
So been a good thing.
That has been a good thing for you guys. So when internet radio came on the scene, did you guys sign up for Sound Exchange right away, or were you kind of skeptical? Because a lot of people were skeptical of Sound Exchange. They were like the Nigerian prince. They were like, we have money for you.
Right. You get that email and you think, I don't know about this. This sounds kind of sketch. But I called them. They sent us a couple of emails, and then I called them, and they were so nice, and they explained it very well. And I said, okay, sign us up. So we've been, I think since 2010, we've been doing Sound Exchange.
Great. And how is that going for you?
It is amazing. We've probably, I don't know if you want to talk numbers here, because it's kind of, I mean, it's so hard to tell where these things come from, but we saw a little under $1,000 a month just to begin with for this song, just in U.S.,
Wow.
not international. And it's increasing a little bit. So I think it averages out to about $1,200 a month that we make through these performance royalties, which is the first money that I have ever made
Right.
off of this record.
Since it was released in 1986.
1986.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you 30 years later.
I know, right? The little song that could. It
Yeah.
just keeps going. It's like one of our children that we sent out, and it keeps,
And it's finally
they've
sending
done well.
back money.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Taking care of you. So now can you extrapolate? I mean, that's good in terms of getting a sense of 30 years later, this song is making this much per month. But since you guys have actually gotten songwriting royalties since the beginning, since it was originally played on the radio, can you extrapolate or estimate like what you've received, about how much money you missed out on in performance royalties had there been a performance royalty when your
Wow.
song was played on the radio?
That is hard to tell. I know on terrestrial radio, as a songwriter, John makes about 7 cents per play.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in the 80s, those little cha-ching, cha-chings were, coming in quite a bit. But it's because it has lasted so long, I mean, I'm not, a genius at math anyway, but it would have added up.
Yeah,
And
it would have been significant.
then the whole international piece, because it was a hit in the UK, in Germany, in Italy. We still get email from fans in Bulgaria and Russia. And
Wow.
I mean, it's amazing how American culture is spread throughout the world. I mean, it is one of our biggest imports. And the fact that we're one of 3 countries in the world that doesn't pay performance rights to our artists is just, it's despicable.
It's despicable.
and wrong.
It is. And that's what we were speaking about with Congressman Nadler about the reciprocity.
Yes.
Because we are net exporters of culture in America. So, for example, your song gets played all over the place in foreign countries. Those countries, if you guys weren't the songwriter, all those performance royalties that are sitting there are just sitting in a bank for you somewhere and sitting in some collection agency.
Yep.
Luckily, because you're the songwriters, you were able to get a hold of the songwriting royalties.
Yes. And that was one of the things that we actually did right. And we made mistakes along the way, but one of them was that we created our own publishing company. So we have somebody administer our publishing, but we have most of the rights. Of course, Atlantic Records still owns the master rights to I Can't Wait. And that will probably, it will be our children's children that might see money from that, because we still owe them quite a bit for the last record we made. In fact, we got a special delivery UPS yesterday of like a stack of 500 sheets of paper that show how much we made over the last year through Atlantic. And we still owe them, I don't know, $225,000 or something like that. So and we made, I think, against that because it's digital now. So there aren't any actual copies of the record that are selling. That's just digital downloads. The money last year, I think, that was made was like $7,000 in digital downloads. So I don't know. You can do the math on that one, but we're never going to see any money from Atlantic. That's for sure.
That is amazing to me. And it totally makes me want to geek out and like get into my label hat and be like, do they cross-collateralize your records? But I won't do that because people will leave in droves. I don't want to do that. But one thing, since you bring up Atlantic, you told me a story before that I thought was really fascinating, which is you guys re-recorded your 2 biggest hits in 2010. And you went to put them up on iTunes, and you found out that Atlantic had never put them on iTunes.
That's right.
So they just missed this opportunity. They weren't even bothering to try to make money.
No. And it was just, I think, about a year and a half ago that somebody over there went, oh, gee, I think maybe we should put this one on iTunes, you
Oh,
know?
man.
And so it finally was up there. But people were emailing us and saying, your second record's on iTunes. How come, told you so, how come Poolside isn't on iTunes? And we're like,
Your biggest record is not on iTunes.
yeah, we don't know,
And that could be just an oversight. I mean, I don't want to spend the whole day like slagging the majors, but
Right.
it's also the kind of thing that makes you just, because the PR job that has been done in the music industry is that the majors are just evil, 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 and all they do is try to rip off artists and nickel and dime them. But then you find something like this where you're like, it's not just that they're evil, it's also that they're huge corporations and they have no idea what they're doing half the time. And they just didn't put up this best-selling album.
They've got so much they don't even know what they've got.
Right.
They're just overwhelmed with, and so they're just trying to keep up as they're circling the drain, like it must not be a very fun world that they're living in either. So, but yeah, anyway, it's crazy.
Oh my goodness. Valerie Day is the singer and percussionist in New Shoes. Valerie, thanks so much for joining us on The Future of What.
Thanks for asking me to be here, Portia. It's been fun.
And that's our show. The music we played today was used by permission. You heard Kleenex Lilliput, The Decemberists, Deerhoof, and of course our theme song, Mind Your Own Business by the Delta 5. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. For more info on our shows, check out our website at killrockstars.com/thefutureofwhat. Our program was engineered by Brent Asbury at Beta Petrol and is produced by Will Watts and Anna McLean. I'm Portia Sabin, president of Kill Rock Stars. See you next week.